The riders came up the road 7 strong, and Harwick sat his horse at the gate like a man who had already won. Behind Garrett, the children stood without being told to. Beside him, Mira had not moved since she stepped out of the barn. "There's still the matter of that fence line," Harwick said. Nobody answered him. None of them moved. And Harwick, for the first time in his life, counted the odds and did not like what he came up with. That autumn had started simply enough. Garrett came out before the sun most mornings and went to work. The east fence needed posts. The barn had been leaning since the year before, and would lean again next year, and he had stopped expecting otherwise. The well was good. The ridge to the north was where it had always been. These were the facts of the place, and he had come to know them the way you come to know anything that matters, by living alongside it until it stops surprising you. He had come to this land 3 years back. His wife was already gone by then. He brought the children and the tools and what remained of the money, and he built what he could build and let the rest go. 3 years. He did not count the days anymore. He counted what needed doing instead, and there was always enough of that to keep him from counting anything else. There were 3 children. Tam was 12, and had her jaw and her way of going still when something bothered him. He did not say this to Tam, he just recognized it when he saw it. Lena was 8 and watched everything and said about half of what she thought, which was more than most people managed. Pip was 4 and did not know yet that the world was hard, and Garrett had decided to let her not know for as long as he could manage it. He was not a farmer by nature. He had done other things before this. His hands knew which direction to face when a sound came out of the tree line, and his body had ideas about doors and exits that took real effort to quiet. Not a man who startled easily. He had been working on that the same as the fence and the barn, one board at a time, without expecting to finish. That morning he pulled posts until his shoulders ached. A branch snapped somewhere to the west. He went still without meaning to, stood that way for a long moment, then set the post driver down and went back to work. Lena was on the porch when he came in for water, looking down the road the way she did sometimes. He did not ask what she was watching for. He was not sure she knew. He refilled his cup and went back out. Pip was in the yard, intent on a game with a stick and a row of stones that had rules only she understood. Tam was behind the barn. He could hear the sound of work. He put them to bed one at a time, and then sat at the table with bread and water, and the quiet of the house around him. The chair across from him was empty. It had been empty for a long time. He sat with his hands flat on the table and did not think about that. He just sat. She came out of the dark from the east. Garrett did not hear her. He had gone in at dusk and lit the lamp and fed the children and read to Pip until she fell asleep sitting up, which she always did. He had checked the latch on the back door and stood for a moment in the kitchen listening to the house settle, and by the time he sat down at the table, there was nothing outside his window but the cold and the dark and the long ridge going black against the sky. Outside, the night was cold, the first real cold of the season, the kind that comes with teeth. She had been walking since the last of the light, and she reached the gatepost and sat down against it, her back to the wood and her legs out in front of her. She did not knock. She sat with her hand resting on a small pouch at her belt, not reaching into it, just resting there. She did not move. She was very tall, even sitting. Dark. She wore a coat that had seen better weather in a better year, and she had the look of someone who had not stopped moving in a long time, and had only just now run out of distance to cover. She sat that way until the lamp in the house went out. Then she sat some more. Garrett came out at first light. He was buttoning his coat when he saw the shape at the gate and stopped in the yard without thinking about it. It was the size of it that stopped him first. Then the stillness. He did not reach for anything. He was the kind of man who ran his eyes around a yard before he moved through it, and he did that now and then. He crossed to the gate and went through and walked toward it. When he got close enough, he saw it was a woman. An orc woman, very tall, even sitting, her legs folded out on the ground, her back against the post he had put there 2 autumns ago. There was frost on the ground around her. She was awake. She had been awake for a while by the look of her eyes, not the kind of awake that comes from just waking. The other kind. She looked at him. He looked at her. Neither of them said anything first. He looked at the ground around her. No pack, no bedroll, nothing set beside her that she had come with. Just what she wore, and that one hand still on the pouch at her belt. He said nothing for a long moment. The ridge to the north was going pale in the early light. He watched it instead of her. It was the kind of looking a man does when he needs a moment. "How long have you been there?" he said, not quite a question. "Since dark," she said. He looked back at her then, at her hands, at the ground where her feet were, at the pouch. He did not ask about it. He stood there with his hands in his coat pockets and the cold coming up off the ground around them both. He had not told her to go. He had not offered her anything. He had asked one question, and she had answered it. He looked at the ridge again. The light was still thin. The morning had not yet decided what it was going to be. He stood there long enough that the cold worked its way through his coat. Then he turned back to her. "Come in." "Off the road," he said. He did not say she could stay. He did not say what came next. He turned and walked back through the gate and left it open behind him. She stood. It took a moment, not struggling, just slow the way a body moves. When it has been still for a long time in cold weather, she was taller than he had expected from a distance. He was not a small man, but she cleared him by a full head, maybe more, and she had the kind of height that changed the proportions of everything around her. She had to duck slightly to come through the gate. She did it without looking at it, the way tall people learn to manage things that were not built with them in mind. She followed him across the yard without comment. The back door opened. Pip came out first, because Pip always came out first. She saw the orc woman, and stopped in the middle of the yard and looked up and up. She did not look afraid. She looked interested the way she looked at beetles and at the underside of mushrooms and at anything her mind had not yet sorted into a name. She took 2 steps closer. Mira went still. Tam came through the door behind Pip and stopped dead when he saw her. He stayed in the doorway, one hand on the frame. His face said everything. His mouth was not saying, and his mouth was not saying anything. Lena came to the porch railing and held it and watched, and said nothing. Garrett did not say anything to any of them. He went to the well and pulled up a bucket and filled a cup and set it on the fence post nearest to where Mira was standing. He did not hand it to her. He just set it where she could reach it and went back to what he was doing. She drank the whole cup without stopping. She handed it back, and he filled it again and set it down in the same place. Tam said something low to his father, not loud enough for the yard, but not so low that Mira could not hear if she was paying attention. Garrett did not answer him. He looked at the ridge. A rider came up the road. Garrett heard the horse before he saw it. The rider slowed when he came level with the gate, turned his head, looked at Mira, looked at Garrett, and kept going. Garrett watched the road until the sound was gone completely. He was not afraid. He was not unconcerned either. Not those 2 things, and not calm, something in between them which he had learned to use. The children had all gone quiet when the rider passed. Nobody had needed to tell them to. After a while, he turned from the road and said, "Where are you headed?" Mira had been watching the road since the rider passed. She turned and looked at him. "West," she said. He looked at her the way he had looked at the fence line that morning, measuring without appearing to measure at the pouch at her belt, at her hands, at the ground where her feet were. He did that for a moment. "There's a barn," he said. "It leans, but it's dry." She did not say thank you. She said, "For how long?" He said, "We'll see." She was already at the east fence when he came out. He had pulled on his coat in the dark. The sun was not yet up. There was enough light in the sky to see by, and she was out at the far end of the broken fence line with a post bar, working the first dead post out of the ground. She had not knocked, she had not asked. She had simply found what was broken and started. He went back to the barn and got the post driver and the box of hardware he kept on the shelf above the door. He walked out to the east field and started at the near end of the fence line and did not say anything. They worked that way for 2 hours. She was efficient, not fast exactly, but no motion wasted. She assessed a post before she touched it, knew which ones needed pulling and which needed bracing, set the bar at the right angle every time. She knew how to read land, which direction the soil drained, and where the ground was soft and where it had gone hard with frost. He noticed these things, the way he noticed things that mattered, without remarking on them. At noon, Lena came out with a bucket and 2 cups. She set 1 cup on the fence post, nearest Mira. She did not look at her. She handed the other to Garrett, and then went back toward the house. Mira said, "Thank you." Lena slowed for a step, but did not turn around. It was a small thing, not friendship. Something before friendship, which was not nothing. The fence was in better shape by dusk. He looked at what they had done and then went in to put supper together. She washed at the well and came in after the children were already at the table, and nobody said anything about the fence being fixed. They ate. When the children were in bed, Garrett came back out. She was sitting on the porch steps with her elbows on her knees. He sat on the step below her. They were quiet for a while. He said, "Where did you come from, East?" she said. He looked at the ridge. The last of the light was almost gone. He said, "Family there." She was quiet for a moment. A long one, not avoiding it. Working up to something plain. "I have no family anymore," she said. She said it quietly, the way you say something that has been said inside you so many times. It has stopped having edges. He did not say he was sorry. He did not say anything for a long time. He sat with his hands resting on his knees and looked at the ridge and the dark coming in off the north. Then he said, "My kids need a mother." He did not look at her when he said it. He looked at the yard, the well, the fence, the barn, the way a man looks at what he has when he is trying to understand what he still needs. He said it plainly, the way he might say the barn needs a new roof or the well needs clearing. It was not a question. It was not a proposal. It was a fact, laid out in the dark, the way the most important things get said, without ceremony, without a way back. She did not answer. He did not ask her to. He looked at the ridge a little longer, then went inside and put out the lamp. She was still sitting there when the light went out. On the 3rd day, Mira fixed the barn door. It had been sagging on its hinge since before Garrett arrived on the land. He had propped it with a stone and called it done and stopped thinking about it. He came back from the field in the late afternoon to find her with the hinge off the doorframe, the pins cleaned and reset, the door hanging straight. He pushed it open. He pushed it shut. He said nothing. On the 4th day, he showed her where the tools were kept. He took her to the back of the barn and pointed to the shelf with the hand tools, and the hook where the long-handled things hung, and the box of nails sorted by size. He did not explain their uses. She already knew. He went back to work. On the 5th day, Pip fell. She was running across the yard in the way she ran, which was faster than was wise and with less attention to the ground than the ground deserved, and she went down hard on the near side of the well and came up crying. Mira was closer. She crossed the yard in a few long strides and crouched down beside the child. Crouching, she was still nearly as tall as Pip standing. She looked at the knee without touching it first. A scrape, not serious. She pulled a strip of cloth from her belt and folded it and wrapped the knee with the kind of efficiency that comes from having done the same thing before. She tied it off. She did not fuss. She did not make a sound about it. Pip stared up at her the whole time. She had stopped crying before the cloth was tied. She looked at Mira's face the way she looked at things that interested her, without fear or strategy, just looking. Garrett had been crossing the yard when it happened. He stopped when Mira reached Pip first. He watched. He went back to the fence. That night he set 5 bowls without thinking about it. Nobody commented on the 5th bowl. Myra came in from the barn and sat at the end of the table, and the children sat, and Garrett sat. That was all it was. Nobody had planned it. It had arrived on its own, the way things do when the shape of a household shifts without anyone deciding to shift it. Tam did not eat much. He sat with his bowl in front of him. He was not rude about it. He was 12, and his face said things. His mouth had decided to leave alone. Garrett looked at him once. Tam looked down. Nobody said anything. Pip asked Mira how tall she was. Mira told her. Pip thought about this for a long time, and then said that her friend at the market was also tall, but not that tall, and her friend's father was very tall, but he had a short horse. She seemed to find some sense in this. Garrett did not ask what the sense was. Mira did not either. After supper he stood in the yard and looked at the fence line in the last of the light. More of it mended than was mended a week ago. He did not say what that meant. He went inside. 3 weeks in, her presence had a shape. She had a place at the table, a spot in the barn where she kept what little she had, a rhythm in the morning. She was up before him most days, which was something he had not expected. He noticed these things without deciding to notice them. He noticed, too, that nobody called what was happening anything at all. No word had been offered for it. No word had been asked for. One morning they worked on the barn. The beam on the south wall had been pulling at its joint since the first cold snap, and he had been meaning to get to it for a month. He put her at one end. They worked without talking, passing tools when the other one needed them, not asking and not saying. It went on for most of the morning. The barn was steadier by evening. He ran his hand along the beam she had braced. He said, "Good." One word. She nodded. That evening she was in the barn when Lena came out. Lena did not say why she had come. She climbed onto a hay bale and sat and watched Mira work the same joint he had helped set that morning, working the wedge in tighter, now that the beam had had time to settle. After a while, Lena said, "Do you have your own language?" Mira said they had their own words for some things. Not all things, more of one than the other, depending on where you were born and who raised you. Lena sat with that a while longer. Then she went inside. She did not look back at Mira when she left. She did not need to. It was not a friendship. It was the first stone of one, which is a different thing. 2 nights later, Pip told a story at the table. It began with a horse that could fly. The horse led to a river that was also a woman who lived in it, and the woman led to a kind of grain that grew only at night had to be harvested before the sun came up, or it became something else, though Pip did not specify what. The story had no point. It had no end that Garrett could identify. It went on a long time. Nobody stopped it. He kept his eyes on his bowl. Mira listened. When Pip stopped, it was not because the story was finished. It was because she had run out of breath. Nobody moved for a moment after the fire crackled. It was the closest thing to easy this house had felt in a long time. He did not say so. He did not move to say it. He just sat with his hands at the edge of the table and let it be what it was. The following week, a rider came up the road and slowed at the gate. Garrett did not know him. The man sat his horse. Mira was by the barn wall with a piece of harness she was mending, and the rider looked at her, and then at Garrett, and then kept going. Garrett watched the road until the bend. He said nothing to Mira about it. That night, Lena came out of the house with a cup of tea. She set it on the barn step and went back inside before Mira came around from the far side of the stalls. She did not wait to see if it was found. The night came like the others, and then went different. The children had been in bed for an hour when Garrett went out to check the yard. He had been doing that every night since the rider slowed at the gate. Not because he expected anything, just because the habit had come back. He walked the perimeter, checked the latch on the front gate, looked north toward the ridge, and when he came around the side of the house, the fire was still burning, and Mira was sitting beside it. He went to the barn door and checked the latch there too. Then he came back and sat down on the far side of the fire. They stayed that way for a while without saying anything. Then she reached into her belt pouch and took something out and set it on the ground between them. It was small, palm-sized. A horse carved from a piece of pale wood, worn smooth at the ears and along the neck, where someone's hand had rubbed it many times. The carving was good, not crude, not decorative. The kind a person makes slowly and with attention. She set it down and put her hands back on her knees and looked at the fire. He looked at it. He did not pick it up. He did not ask. After a while, she said, there had been a column of her people moving west along a border road. She had gone ahead to scout the crossing. There was a skirmish, 2 human factions fighting over a contested road, nothing to do with her people at all. By the time she came back, there was no one left. Her mate, her 2 children, her mother, who was old and had been riding in the cart. She came back and found what she found. And then she kept walking west because there was nothing else to do and no direction that was better than another. She did not look at him while she spoke. She did not look at the horse. She looked at the fire. She said it the way she might describe weather. Not flat, exactly, just plain. He did not say he was sorry. He did not say anything for a long time. The fire popped. The wood had burned down to coals and neither of them moved to add more. He said his wife had been sick, and then she was gone and the children had been very young. Tam had been old enough to understand and young enough that it did him the most damage. For a long time after, all 3 of them asked for her every morning, and he answered as best he could. Then one day, Tam stopped asking. Then Lena stopped. It was easier in one way and worse in another. Pip did not remember her clearly now. He was not sure how much longer before she would not remember her at all. He did not know what to do with that. He said this plainly, and then stopped talking. The fire had burned to a low light. The circle of it had grown smaller, and the shadows had come in from the yard to fill what the fire no longer could. They sat in what was left. Mira reached down and picked up the carved horse and put it back in her belt pouch. She did it without ceremony. It was not the end of what had been said. It was the end of the part where it had been said alone. After a long time, Garrett said, "You don't have to go west." He did not look at her. He did not say she could stay. He did not say it would be easy or that it would be anything at all. He said she did not have to go west. She did not answer. She stood and went to the barn. The next morning she was still there. It was a Tuesday in late autumn when the deputy came. Garrett was at the well when he heard the horse on the road. He looked up. A rider turned in at the gate and came down the lane at a walk. Not fast, not slow. The pace of a man doing a job. The deputy dismounted and tied his horse to the post. He had a leather case under his arm and a county badge on his chest. He was not young. He had the look of someone who had delivered a good many notices and found none of them easy or difficult, just part of the work. He said there had been a complaint. He opened the case and took out a paper and read from it. An Orc woman, believed to be vagrant or unlawfully present under the settlement provisions of the county ordinance, was reported to be residing on the property. He did not raise his eyes from the page while he read. When he finished, he folded the paper and held it. Garrett said, "What does the law require?" The deputy said, "Proof of employment or tenancy would satisfy the ordinance. Or the individual in question could move on within the week." He said this the way you say a thing you have said many times to many people, without any opinion about it. Garrett said, "She works the land, she's a tenant." The deputy wrote something in a small book he kept in his coat pocket while he was writing. Mira came around the near corner of the barn. She stopped when she saw the deputy. She read what she was looking at, the way she read everything, correctly and quickly, and she stayed where she was. The deputy looked at her height, at her hands, which were bare and had the dirt of the morning's work on them, at the work apron she was wearing. He wrote something else in the book. He gave Garrett a copy of the notice and said there would be a follow-up. He thanked Garrett for his time. He said it the same way. He had said everything else. He was civil about it. He did not threaten. He did not reassure. He was the mechanism of the law doing its work. Nothing more than that. And he got back on his horse and rode the way he had come. Garrett watched until the road was empty. He went back to the well. Mira had not moved. He picked up the bucket and set it back on the post and said, "Get your name on something. A letter. Something written." She said, "I can write." He said, "I know." He went inside. She went back around the barn. That evening he sat at the table and told her what the notice said and what it meant and what the law would likely want next. The children were already in bed. The house was quiet. He told her plainly without alarm, and she listened the same way. In the hallway, Tam was standing still. He had come down for water and heard his father's voice and stopped. He had one hand on the doorframe. He did not move it until his father's voice stopped. He did not go in. He did not go back upstairs. He stood in the hallway in the dark and listened to the whole thing. When it was done, he went back up without a word. 3 days after the deputy came, Harwick did. Garrett was working the near field when he heard them on the road. He looked up. 4 horses. Harwick in front, 3 riders behind him, coming at the pace of men who did not need to hurry. He let them come. He put the post driver down and walked toward the gate. Harwick stopped at the gate. He did not dismount. He was a broad man, well dressed for a Tuesday in the field, and he sat his horse the way men sit horses when they want to look like they are not trying to look any particular way. He smiled when Garrett looked up at him. He had a roll of paper under his arm. "Garrett," he said. His voice was pleasant. It was the kind of pleasant that comes with leverage already in the speaker's pocket. He said there was a boundary question. He had a land survey, county stamped. The acreage along the east fence, good soil, near the creek, might not fall within Garrett's deed as written. He had been looking into it. He thought Garrett should know. He did not open it. He stood on his side of it and looked at Harwick. "I know where my fence is," he said. "The county may see it differently," Harwick said. Harwick looked past Garrett at Mira by the barn. She had come out when she heard the horses, and she was standing at the barn wall at the near corner of it, where she could see the road, not hiding, not advancing, just standing. He said something then about the county's interest in the property, and who was living on it, and what the law said about arrangements of that kind. He said it pleasantly. He was not threatening. He was simply noting a thing he thought Garrett might want to be aware of. Garrett said nothing for a long time. Then he said, "Is there something you need from me today, Harwick, or are you just riding?" Harwick smiled again. He said there was a meeting at the county seat the following week regarding the deed question, and he had thought it only fair to let Garrett know. He said he would see him there. He turned his horse, and his 3 riders turned with him, and they went back down the road. Garrett stood at the gate until they were gone. The road was quiet when they left it. He heard Mira's footsteps, and she came to stand beside him. She looked at the road. He looked at it too. Neither of them said anything for a moment. She said, "How serious?" He said, "Serious enough." She said, "What do you need?" He said, "I need the fence to stay where it is." They stood there a little while longer. He went back to the field. She went back to the barn. That night, Tam came downstairs while Garrett was still at the table with the deed papers spread out in front of him. Tam looked at the papers for a moment. Then he said, "I want to go with you to the county seat." Garrett looked at his son for a long time. He said, "No." Tam did not argue. He stood with his hands at his sides and looked at the papers once more, and then he went back upstairs. He did not slam the door behind him. Garrett looked at the stairs after he was gone. He looked at the deed. He looked at the window, which was dark with night, and showed him nothing. He looked at the chair across the table, which was empty. He sat there a while longer. Then he put the papers away. The county clerk had seen the deed the week before, and the deed had held. That was Tuesday. On the following Tuesday, Harwick came back. Anyway, Garrett was at the well when he heard them. He counted the hoofbeats before he looked up. 6 riders this time, with Harwick at the front. 7 horses in all. They came down the road at a walk, the way people come when they have decided they are in no hurry. He did not go inside. He set down the bucket and stayed where he was. The barn door opened. Mira came out. She looked at the road, looked at Garrett, and walked to stand beside him. She did not touch him. She did not say anything. She was taller than any of the riders on that road by a clear measure, and she stood the way you stand, when you have made a decision, and the decision is not moving. Harwick had not spoken yet. She was already there. The back door of the house opened. Tam came across the yard and stopped on the other side of Garrett. He stood straight. His hands were at his sides. Garrett looked at him once. He did not tell him to go back in. Lena came to the doorway. She stayed there. Pip was behind her, not visible from the road. Harwick pulled up at the gate. He did not open it. He looked at Mira. He looked at Garrett. He looked at the 6 riders behind him, and then back at Mira, and back at Garrett. The pause that followed was longer than anything the moment required. His hands were still on the reins. He was counting something, though nothing in the yard had changed since he last counted it. He counted Mira first. He counted Tam. He looked at the door where Lena was standing. "There's still the matter of that fence line," he said. Garrett said, "The county clerk saw my deed last week. I expect you know what he said." Harwick's gaze went back to Mira. He said something about the orc situation in the territory. General language. Not about her, he would say if asked. Just about the situation. He kept his voice pleasant, the way it was always pleasant when he had made a point of keeping it that way. Nobody answered him. Not Garrett, not Mira, not Tam. They stood in the yard and looked at the 7 horses on the other side of the gate, and the silence went on past the point where a silence is a pause. It had weight to it. It was the weight of people who had decided to be in the same place and were letting that be enough. A horse shifted behind Harwick. Nobody on Garrett's side moved. Something moved across Harwick's face. Not fear, exactly. The word was not quite right for what it was. It was closer to the recognition that this was a different kind of ground than the one he had expected to be standing on. When he came up the road that morning, he looked at his 6 riders. He looked at what was in front of him. He counted something again and came up with the same number. It was not the number he had come with. He pulled his reins. He said, "We'll be back." He turned his horse and his riders turned with him, and they went back down the road. They did not move until the road was empty. Nobody said anything. They stood there until the sound of the horses was gone, and the morning had gone back to being just a morning. The well was still there. The fence was still there. The barn was still leaning the way it had always leaned. He put his hand on Tam's shoulder. Brief, without ceremony, he left it there for a moment. Then he took his hand away and did not say anything. Tam did not say anything either. The afternoon came in quiet after they were gone. Garrett went out to the east fence to check what needed checking. He could see the kitchen window from there, and through it, at some point in the early afternoon, he noticed Mira and Lena at the counter. Not an event. Just 2 people in a kitchen. One of them tall enough to have to bend slightly over the work surface, the other not quite tall enough to reach it without standing on her toes. He went back to work. Pip found the carved horse some time after that. She had been in the kitchen too, and Mira had been at the table resting her hands after the work, and Pip came up beside her and reached into the belt pouch the way children reach into things without announcement. She pulled out the horse and held it up. "Is it a horse?" she said. "Yes," Mira said. "Can I hold it?" Mira looked at the horse in Pip's hand for a moment. Then she said, "Yes." She set it on the windowsill and studied it from the other side of the room. She set it on the porch step and looked at it from the yard. She brought it back inside when she was done and put it on the table in front of Mira and went off to find something else. She had not been asked to give it back. She just did. Mira picked it up and put it back in her pouch. She did it without ceremony. Something in the way she did it was different than before. Not lighter, exactly. Just the right weight for what it was now. That evening Garrett came in, and they sat at the table and went through what had happened and what it meant. The deed was secure. The complaint had been dismissed. Harwick would probably try again, but he had less leverage than he had started with. They went through it the way you go through a problem, when you are both in it and you both know what the answer is, and you are just saying it out loud to make it solid. Tam came into the kitchen while they were still at the table. He looked at Mira. He said, "Do you know anything about dry stone walls?" She said she did. He said the south wall had been falling in for 2 years, and nobody had gotten to it. She said they could start on it tomorrow. He said, "All right." He went back out. He had not looked away from her when he spoke. He had not been warm about it. He had not been cold. He had been direct, the way you are direct with someone when you have decided they are worth being direct with. Supper happened the way it happened most nights, all 5 of them at the table without anyone planning it. Garrett looked at where everyone was sitting and noticed that nobody was in the same place they had been in at the first supper. He did not say anything about this. That night he sat at the table after the children were in bed and Mira had gone to the barn. He sat with his hands flat on the table and did not think about anything in particular. He noticed that the part of him that had been braced for years had gone quiet. Not gone quiet. It was what things sound like when you have stopped waiting for the floor to give way. Not peace. Something quieter than that and harder to name, but there. Winter came and went. Spring came after it. The barn held through the cold months, which it had not done the winter before. The east fence held too. The south wall, which Mira and Tam had spent 3 days rebuilding stone by stone from the base, stood straight through the freeze and the thaw, without losing a stone. By late spring, the near field was planted for the first time in 4 seasons. Garrett walked the rows in the early morning, the way his father had walked them when the farm was still his father's, with the sun not yet over the ridge and his boots wet from the dew. He had not done that in a long time. He had not thought to. One afternoon in the first warm weeks, Mira was in the yard with Pip. Pip had the carved horse. She had asked for it that morning, and Mira had given it over without pausing, the way she had not done a year ago and did not think about now. Pip was showing the horse something in the grass. Lena was at the kitchen door. Tam was on the east fence, running his hand along the top rail to check the work. Garrett came out of the barn and stopped. He stood in the yard and looked at all of it. Lena at the door with her arms crossed, not going anywhere. Pip in the grass talking to the carved horse, in a voice too quiet to hear from where he stood. Mira crouching beside her, patient, not correcting, not moving away. Tam on the fence, with both hands on the top rail, the way Garrett had shown him, broad-shouldered and straight, his father's height, or close enough that the rest would close by autumn. He stood there for a long time. Nobody asked him what he was doing. Nobody needed to. It was not quite a family. The word was too small, too given, as though family were something you were born into rather than something you built. But it was what any of them had. None of them had planned it. All of them had built it, board by board and stone by stone and morning by morning, and it had held. He turned back toward the barn and caught movement on the far road. A rider. Too distant to make out, too far to count what was behind. He watched. Mira had come upright in the yard and was watching too, not because he had said anything, but because she saw him looking. The rider went around the far bend and was gone. The road went empty, the way roads go after something passes. The world beyond the fence had not finished moving. It had not finished before, and it would not finish now. But the fence held, and what was inside it was theirs. Evening fell with fire through the kitchen window, and the smell of supper through the open door, the east fence straight along the near field, the ridge to the north going blue and then dark, the way it had always done and would keep doing. The barn stood solid at his back. The well was full. The rope sat coiled on the post, the way Mira had started coiling it. Did you enjoy the story? Subscribe to the channel to watch more stories like this one. It helps the channel a lot. And drop a comment down below. I always read them and use your feedback to make our content better. Thanks so much, channel name.